So tonight we just thought we'd talk quickly about recovery and the importance of recovery and why, if you're an athlete and you're working out or you're training and you're competing in season, why periodisation and recovery is really important. So periodisation means the plan. So what is your plan of recovery? So are you going to recover more after a game or more during the week? Or when are you going to spend the most amount of time recovering in the time of your, the season? So for example, it's okay for you to not feel very good in a pre-season. And what I mean by that is we're trying to create a fatigue response to make you adapt from that. So we're going to make you do fitness work, we're going to make you do some skill work, we're going to make you do gym work, we're going to make you do all those things that make us all a bit uncomfortable, and we're going to get better from that. The periodisation of that is pushing you to a point of fatigue, but not overreaching so far past that fatigue point that it becomes like an overtraining or an injury problem, so then you're not available. So an athlete conversation I had tonight was centered around, I made a goal with this person to spend the next year with no more than 1 week of unavailability in a year. And what I meant by that is by planning and structuring training, recovery, understanding body, making sure that you speak about symptoms as soon as they start, and think about gaps in training and coming back to loading and what that means, meaning that if you have a gap of 2 weeks, you can't come back to a full training load because the change is so much that alone can create too much of a stress response. And so when you plan recovery in the season, this is how I would do it if you are an athlete doing 5 cumulative sessions a week. So let's say on Saturday or Sunday you play a game and it might take 60 to 70 or 80 minutes, and that's going to be rated at a 9 or a 10 out of 10 because that's hard work. And then so the training load alone from that is fairly high. So if your RPE is counted at 9, you play for 60 minutes, you've already got quite a lot of training load points, and it's an arbitrary unit. So let's say on Monday, that's the day that you should spend doing recovery. It's not the day to go to gym and try as hard as you can to push heavy benches, to push heavy squats. It's the day to go and train at a moderate intensity, or doing, it doesn't mean you can't train heavy. What it means is you can't train heavy and go almost to failure, because if you're doing that Monday, game day plus 1 or 2, generally the body is still fatigued and recovering. And what we want to do in a season is see you recover properly, so then you can train at least 1 or 2 times in the week at an intensity to at least maintain or aggressively maintain. So try and still improve. But by the end of the week, we want to taper that off so that you are the best when it really matters. So if you go and double up on a really fatiguing workload, you game plus another day, then you're looking at maybe a Wednesday before you even recovered properly, and then you've only got a couple of days left before the game, so you can't train hard in the middle of the week. Then you've got to think about slowing down, and you'd argue that when you train hard when you're tired, did you actually do a good job? So you've got to consider your own body and your own the symptoms that you play. But if you're getting ongoing muscle soreness, waking up in the morning more tired than when you went to sleep, if you're feeling like you're not hungry, so I don't need to eat. I don't need to eat breakfast. I'm not hungry. I don't need to eat before I go to training. I'm not hungry. They're worrying signs of where you've pushed the window too hard, because you should be hungry. You should be thirsty. You should want to eat. You should want to fuel yourself. And when you get to the point of overtraining and you've got too much stimulus going on, appetite for some people is the first thing that disappears. So the next part is then that soreness. So soreness should go away 2 days post. And I spoke about this the other day in another post. It shouldn't be you're sore for the entire week, unless you're carrying a specific injury and you've got someone working with that and you're getting to the end of a season and then having it sorted out. You shouldn't have persistent soreness. And especially if you're an adolescent, that's when we start to ask some questions. So, how much load are you carrying? And that's where you might need to plan a lower load week. Talk to people around you. If you're a younger athlete, talk to people you trust and let them help you structure that. If you're an older athlete, having a straight up and down chat with the people that manage your workload and say, look, I'm not feeling very good. And they might decide that that's okay, but then sometimes I'll say, well, no, actually, we need you to be really okay this weekend, so we're going to drop load and we're going to control your loading, and we're still going to try hard, but we're going to drop the cumulative effect. So we're going to drop the amount of work, and then by the weekend you've recovered properly, and then you can go back to your normal loading pattern. So in terms of recovery, then going back to that point, so what does recovery look like? So day of game, if you're sore, if you have bumps, if you have bruises, there is some evidence that ice works in that context. So it's worth trying. And ice means either ice immersion or ice therapy, so direct on skin. So if you're icing muscles, generally that's going to be to help inflammation or just soreness, so just numbing the area. If you're icing joints, you're kind of taking away joint swelling to create joint space and therefore better movement. Things like hot and cold, they are well regarded in research. Ice therapy or ice bathing is well regarded, especially after field sessions, not so much after heavy gym sessions, but more so there. Things like your sleep pods or extra little bit daytime sleeps, if you have the opportunity to do that, is a really great idea, just to shut the body down for a little bit of time and then go back to what you have to do, especially if you're a multi-session training person in the day. And you have to think about periodizing that. So you might ice bath for 4 weeks in the most hectic part of your season, and then you might stop it for 2 weeks and then go back to it again, because if you just ice bath for 10 weeks straight, in general, you'll adapt over a 4 to 6 week period, and then the adaptations will slow down. So you want to take it away and replace it with something else. So things that you can replace it with is a simple compression therapy. So that's been seen to be beneficial, especially at restoring good blood flow to areas. So that can be Normatec or Hyperice or something like that. Or you can just use compression garments, which are, in my experience, arguably just as good as Normatec, except the Normatec provides like a massage-based effect, which is nice. And then using like nutrition as a recovery. So making sure you're getting carbohydrates in as soon as you can post-exercise. If you're doing heavy stressful contact, heavy stressful weights, making sure you get protein in before and after so that your repair process is done. And whilst I'm not a sports nutritionist, it's just really common sense. You've got to make sure you feed yourself properly, because if you don't, then you just can't keep backing up on no fuel. So there's some of the ways that you can look at recovery and periodizing that. I guess from an individual point of view, it's impossible to give you individual advice, because you've got to understand the circumstances of your world. But it is what we do in terms of that higher level strength and conditioning base, in terms of helping you plan your recovery cycling so that you get the absolute best out of yourself when it really matters. So if that's something you're interested in, it's something that I found really interesting when I went through my master's program in the art form of planning training and then planning recovery to make sure that you're in your best state possible. So message to take home is plan recovery just like you plan training, because if you can't recover from something, then you can't work hard. And if you can't keep working hard well, then it's hard to get the absolute best out of yourself.